And this is Into the World, and joining me today as we take one of the most in-depth look at a Star Trek episode ever taken on YouTube. All right, we're all familiar with bloopers, but what we're going to take a look at today isn't just bloopers. We're going to take a look at any time something appears to be just slightly off in an episode. It may be a blooper, it may be a continuity error, it may be a plot point that everybody missed. But along the way, we will talk about some things no one else on YouTube has ever talked about before. So pull up a chair and remember why we are Star Trek fans, as well as why we have the reputation for analyzing every last frame. Join me today as we take a look at the conscience of the King. Now, this scene isn't a blooper as much as it's just plain unsettling. Captain Kirk's down on the planet at a cocktail party when somebody hands him a drink. He innocently takes a sip from it, but a few moments later, in walks Lenore Caridian. After a little bit of flirting, she goes,
"Is that for me?"
Without even thinking twice. He goes, "Why not?" And he hands it to her and lets her drink it, even though he just drank from it. Now, again, not a blooper, but definitely the height of rudeness. Okay, this is wrong on just so many levels. Where do I start? Well, first off, you got a murder victim. He's laying right there at the scene of the crime. You do not pick the body up and drag it inside the murder victim's house and leave him on the couch. You just don't handle crime scenes that way.
Now an attempt has been made against Lieutenant Riley while the company is on board the Enterprise.
Doc isn't sure that it was a murder attempt.
Listen, do you hear it?
Okay, so I guess the first thing I want to talk about is how subtle the buildup of the overload was. Obviously, when it was first triggered, it made little to no noise at all. They would have heard it before now. Spock hears it before Jim does, but the reality of the situation is we've seen phasers on overload in other places, and they make that loud noise as soon as they possibly can to warn everybody who happens to be nearby. Also, notice that when they are literally ransacking Jim's cabin, trying to find out where this phaser's been hidden, Spock wastes no time. He goes right for Jim's chest of drawers there in the cabin. Kirk checks all sorts of things, but he doesn't check every container that is available to him. You would think you would look in these containers first. There's containers around his bed that he never even touches. Okay, Kirk has just informed them that the phaser is set for overload, and if it blows, it's going to take out this entire deck. Yet, a few seconds from now, he's going to find that phaser and drop it down what appears to be a garbage chute in the outer hallway, and you can actually feel the ship shake when the explosion goes off. But where was it when it exploded? If it made it into the vacuum of space, there would be no shockwave. If it's still in the ship somewhere, we should have heard residual damage. Come on, you know you like the video. So do me a favor and go ahead and click that like button down below so that YouTube will know to show this to more viewers. Now, in this scene, we experience what I would like to call maybe just a malfunction of special effects. The window behind Lenore Caridian has little white lights to simulate stars against a black background. So we clearly see that, but at some point in this shot, you're going to see Kirk crosses the floor to approach her, and when he does, the camera's positioning changes. Up to this point, it had been at, say, the 5 o'clock position, with Lenore being up at around 11 or 10 o'clock. Now what's happening is Jim moves in, the camera position changes to be more like 3 o'clock, with Jim at, say, 10 and Lenore at, like, 12. And one of the things you'll clearly see is there are no stars in that background. Well, we can briefly see what happened, and that is that when they shifted the way that the camera was pointing, you can actually watch the stars go back to the right-hand side of the black void, but they're not replaced by anything, because they didn't place stars far enough across to be seen if the camera moved that far. They just didn't think about it at the time they shot the episode. Ironically, they fixed this in the remasters. So it really is something that needed to be fixed. This was not a working as advertised shot.
Mr. Spock, the man on top.
Okay, so this one's also a little bit strange. Dr. McCoy is in sickbay wearing his medical smock. And I want to call your attention to that because he wears the smock when he is on duty. So here he is sitting at his desk in sickbay, and he's drinking while on duty. And in this scene, McCoy tells Spock,
Oh, now I know why they were conquered.
however, in the immunity syndrome, Spock clearly stated, Vulcan has not been conquered within its collective memory. The memory goes back so far that no Vulcan can conceive of a conqueror. If you have any videos, photos, or documents that you would like to donate to us, please feel free to send them to jim@trek-world.com or submit them via the web at submit.trek-world.com.
Captain's log, stardate 2819.8. Suspect under surveillance. Strategic areas under double guard.
Well, wait a minute, Jim. You brought the entire Caridian company on board the Enterprise because you suspected that Anton had something to do with the death of Leighton. So why weren't these people under surveillance before this? They obviously weren't, because nobody noticed anyone wandering around poisoning Riley. So, I mean, there's been no security anywhere here.
Lieutenant Riley was a witness. So were you.
Now, this is the second time we've heard so far a main character in this episode talk about how there are only a handful of witnesses left that could identify positively Kodos the Executioner from their exposure to him 20 years before. However, we also know in this episode that there are mugshots of Kodos the Executioner, and they have voice prints of Kodos the Executioner. So certainly, yes, they can still identify the gentleman, even if all of the witnesses are dead. Okay, I guess my mom was right. She always told me that Formula 409 was poison. So you remember that voice print stuff that I was talking about? Well, now Jim decides to put it to the test.
Read this into that communicator.
And on one, Caridian.
The test is virtually infallible. It will tell us whether you're Caridian or Kodos the Executioner.
So Spock presents the match between Kodos and Anton Caridian,
I believe we have a match, Captain.
and Jim's infallible machine is no longer infallible. In fact, he takes it a step further and says,
We're dealing with a man's life. No machine can make that decision.
this is really a question that can be trusted to no machine. Well, Jim, why did you do it if you weren't going to even trust its answer? We've seen sickbay enough to know that it's not exactly an airtight location. So here is McCoy sitting at his desk, transcribing his personal log, and spills the beans entirely about Kodos the Executioner,
And is suspected of being Kodos, the Executioner.
which gives Riley what he needs to go flying down the hallway. McCoy should never have said that because he spoke in a normal voice, and how he could figure that Riley would never have heard him is beyond me. And the last thing I want to go over in this episode is what I believe to be probably one of the most poignant displays and depictions of a complete and utter emotional breakdown that you will ever see on any TV show. Lenore's mind is pretty much snapped at the fact that she accidentally has killed her father when she was aiming for Jim. But the way that her mind rumbles by falling back into Shakespeare,
Just no time to sleep.
and the quotes that she does, and the sheer and utter agony in her voice, and the cries that she makes, is probably my candidate for the best performance ever in the original Star Trek television series.
Catch the conscience of the king.